Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. And folks, today we are going to talk about hidden cash and buried treasure. I bet you didn't even realize that as you've been, living the dream out there and doing all the fun things that you do, that you have been hiding away some stash of cash or maybe some hidden treasures out there. But before we get into the show there, let me ask you, Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really excited about today. It's kind of a momentous occasion for us here at Money on Tap. So
tell me more. Don't hold back.
We have, in fact, recorded 200 shows.
200.
Believe it or not.
And it only took us 10 years to do it. Not really.
That's pretty crazy. I can't believe it's been 200 shows.
Yeah.
So for all our listeners over the next 30 days, was 30 days? Or first 200 callers or 30 days, whatever we get, or emailers, we're going to give out a free Brayshaw Financial Cup, which will be nice.
That's Ben Brayshaw, folks, in case you
Bicentennial edition.
Yeah, Bicentennial edition. Yeah. No, it's been an interesting road. It's been fun. It's been a number of people that we've chatted with, talked with, helped. Just a lot of interesting things along the way that have been really great. I mean, I couldn't have envisioned all that this show has been and done, and I look forward to connecting with with you guys each week too.
Yeah, it's fair to say we've impacted more than those 200 lives, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Hopefully in a good way this time. So, but we're talking about hidden cash. Last week we talked about cash is king. We talked about all the different places to save cash, to address having the right amount of cash a little bit. We kind of went through all those things. But a lot of people don't realize how much cash they really have available to them when they're trying to save. Those rules we talked about, like, do you how much money do you have in the checking account or the savings account, and whether you have CDs or invest. We talked about short-term bonds and bond funds and all different types of things. But I think what people just don't really see or know is how much real cash they have available to them that maybe they don't need all the real cash that they're putting in the bank.
Yeah, I think we're gonna run through at least 7 different potential vehicles or hiding places where if you have these particular instruments or assets, it's quite likely you probably have access to cash.
Not a bad plan. I like the direction that you guys are going with this. Before we get going too far down the road, I want to just reiterate, this is the 200th show of Money on Tap. And if you happen to call us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. By the way, that's an email address. That's not a phone number. If you try dialing info@yourmoneyontap.com, you might get something different than us. But anyways, first 200 calls or emails get a Money on Tap Brayshaw Financial Group mug free to you. And just a thanks for, being here with us. This is a lot of fun, and we always just enjoy the stories that come back and the engagement that we get to the opportunity to, help you along your financial journey. And with that, we'll probably say that at least one more time before we're done here today.
Well, you can also sign up for our newsletter, or if you call in, we'll put you on the newsletter too. We have a quarterly economic update. We have a lot of information that we push out to our listeners that want to get that information. So that'll be good too.
And they want to. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
It's
good.
It's not a mandatory spam option, opt in, opt out. So yeah, we're going to get into money in the news.
All right, up first in Money in the News from Megan Henney at Fox Business. Expecting a tax refund from the IRS? Here's how long it could take. So I think we've all been kind of hearing and reading that the IRS is prepping us for ongoing delays in their processing of business and getting taxes done for this upcoming year or the 2021 taxes and the refund you're looking for in 2022. But what they're telling us already is kind of early guidance that even if you file online, which is what they're really trying to nudge everyone to do, expect at a minimum 21 days before you get that direct deposit.
It's funny that you say that because I heard a statistic about the number, like that the refunds for people were taking like 12 to 18 months on refunds. Like if you overpay, they were still like over a year behind.
Wow.
Which is scary.
Yeah. Well, it's, not like a tax-free loan to the government, I guess.
Yeah, I think they were working on 2018, but I guess, I don't know, 1 year specifically was bad. So,
yeah, in particular, there's some new forms coming out this year. So keep your eyes out for letter 6419, which has to do with the child credits that have been applied here during the pandemic time. So as part of completing your tax picture and making sure that you're as accurate as possible, which is another thing that adds to the timeliness of getting this all done, make sure you've received that letter and have that as part of your tax picture, before you do submit it. Is one of the leading issues that they point to here. I think there's probably a myriad of issues, but they say inaccuracies on returns filed, contributes heavily towards, any kind of delay in getting that refund. But another interesting thing that I pulled out of the very bottom of the article here is that tax day this year is actually April 18th, not the 15th. So we've got a couple extra days to get all that done.
Well, that's nice. I mean, I'll take a couple extra days.
Yeah, every one of them.
if you're a procrastinator, you're still going to get it done the night before.
Right, right.
Should have just told them it was still the 15th. Should have left it that way. Well, next up on our list here, I don't know if you guys like pizza, but I do. And I actually do like Domino's Pizza. And our article is on Domino's from some unreliable source, CNN. Jordan Valinsky. Sorry, Jordan. But Domino's is literally paying people to come pick up their pizzas. I think this is hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving them a $3 tip, if you want to call it, for not having them have to deliver it.
Yeah, if you order online and pick it up, they're going to give you a $3 credit towards your next order, whatever that may be. So you think everybody went, through this whole pandemic process, everybody's a delivery guy now, but apparently not for pizza.
Well, hey, either way, no matter what, that's in today's world and the rising inflation.
Yeah, it's one way to save money.
It's one way to
pick
save
up your
money.
pizza.
Yep, and I would not knock that at all.
Yeah, just at a glance, I just realized that we've had Joe Valinsky on our show here before. Just spotted his picture there. And so good job, Joe. Appreciate you bringing us some great information about Domino's. And I'll agree with you. I don't know when the change happened, but they did. I used to avoid Domino's, and then, I don't know, they actually got busy making some decent pies, and I appreciate it.
Don't tell anybody from New York that.
Oh, no. I still have others that are way ahead of Domino's any day. But,
It's been a while, but we went through hundreds of Dominators at college. I can tell you that. Hundreds of them.
What was ours? Ours was Papa
John's.
Papa John's. Yeah.
That came with the pepperoncini.
Yes.
Love that.
Oh, gosh, I think it's about lunchtime. We must be getting a little hungry here. So Joe Rogan. Oh, Joe. Yeah, and this is an article by Ann Steele that is coming to us around Joe Rogan apologizing. Apparently, Joe has said some things or brought some content that is of controversy. And if you don't know,
seem like the point of his show.
who Joe is, I don't know what else to tell you. Joe
is the center of controversy.
Gosh, why do you have to go and now? I guess it was Neil Young, several other people that really brought to his attention, and I like Neil, and I like several of the other people here that are bringing attention. Some of the content apparently may not have been of the most formidable value, or how do you say that? It's like they.
Well, Spotify basically said, "Hey, listen, we're paying this guy $100 million, and probably the downloads for Neil Young, which most of the money that they get for downloads on these singers go actually to the singers and their different organizations. Like they don't get very much money for it, which is interesting." But Joe Rogan is a profit center for them.
It's incredible to read that he's got 11 million daily listeners.
Well, he's going to have 11 million one because, but the apology sends me on a whole other track. I mean, how many times is he going to have to apologize? The guy is the center of controversy.
Yeah.
So, like, we can apologize every time you say something somebody doesn't like?
I think it's why most people are listening to him. And maybe he's not the person that they need to go to instead of a doctor or, instead of their financial planner.
Well, wasn't it Rush Limbaugh who had more listeners of people that hated him than liked him?
Right.
So
I think we lose sight of the fact that, it's supposed to be entertainment.
Right.
Is really what it is.
Right.
Separate from the fact that he's speaking the truth.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, the gospel according to Joe Rogan.
Oh, Joe.
Well, you know
Don't
what?
apologize next time. Come on.
Well, he is another Newton's finest, so I got to give him a little tip of the cap for that. But, it's entertainment. Take it for what it is.
Yeah. And Joni Mitchell, your music is washed up at this point.
How long ago would it have been? Like seriously, if we were to take like the whole technology thing and roll it back, right? When Joni Mitchell was popular, the things that she was doing and speaking and like getting out there, she was controversial.
Oh, she said it's one hypocrite talking to another, right?
It is. That's what I'm kind of like. You guys, come on, seriously.
He's apologizing for something he really does believe.
The apology is not exactly an apology. What he just said is he'll be, more balanced. He'll bring in some other voices to kind of, discuss the other end of the coin. But, honestly, I wouldn't say I'm in 100% agreement with a lot of what's said there. But I would tell you, it still falls under the First Amendment for me. The guy's got a right to a platform. He can say what he wants. So does everybody who attends the show. And if you don't like it, turn it off or pull your music, which I respect their position too,
Right. And so with that, I think it's time that we invite Dan to leave the studio. I did not like what he said right there. Oh, shoot. Well, I think we're actually going to get into a show here today sooner rather than later, which it's all about cash, right? And we talked about last week, cash is king. This week, we're going to talk about hidden cash. These are just some of the most interesting of places where people, as asset development happens, that we discover people don't even realize that they have the potential access to cash for, you name it, whatever the situation is. We're going to uncover some of those places today, and we're going to put you and your personal finance journey first on this show today. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Go ahead, send us that email, give us a call. First 200 do get a Money on Tap mug. Thanks for joining us for 200 Money on Tap shows.
Ben, how often do we have somebody come into the office and they don't have a financial plan? And how critical is it for us to put the pieces together and make sure that their future, their retirement, is a successful experience? We talk about it all the time here at Money on Tap. If that's you, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Whether you have 100,000, 500,000, 5 million, look, folks, we have the right planner for you. Whether it's Ben or myself, Seth Krussman, we're here for you to get the plan together and make sure that next step is right.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Folks, we have been doing Money on Tap for 200 episodes, and in honor of you, our listenership, we'd like to say thank you. If you call us or email us and just say hi, well, I think we probably need an address with that as well, because we're going to mail you a mug, Money on Tap Brayshaw Financial Group mug, just as a thank you. So we appreciate you. Today we're talking about hidden cash. It's the place, it's the stuff you didn't even know. You didn't even realize you're doing just this stuff over here, and you're accumulating and you're building assets and you're working and you're raising families and you're doing all the things. Well, in the process of doing that, you probably have created kind of layers of assets, and a part of that might be some cash that it may very well be your rainy day fund that you just never even realized that you had there. And we sit down on a daily basis with our clients as financial planners at Brayshaw Financial Group, and as we have the conversations and we start to understand who you are and what your goals are, we start to uncover some of these places where either we can potentially start to kind of build around this possibility of needing some cash in the future for weddings, for college, for building your dream home. There's all sorts of things that you might want to have access to this kind of cash for, but it's in some of the most least likely places that just average consumers saving towards their retirement will really understand or know how to get into. So we're going to get into 7 of them here. And if you unlock all 7 of these doors, bing, 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 winner, winner, chicken dinner, that's what you have. But believe it or not, you probably already have some of these places designed in your savings or in your strategies. But ultimately, isn't it great if you can, along this journey, start to create some of these in your path as well?
Yeah, the real value here, and I want this to be really heard by our listeners because it's super important. So, if you're in the middle of something, this is something you should understand, is that everyone's stockpiling or trying to put away enough cash to feel secure. The thing is that security is something that's not real anyways, right? So there is no such thing as security, but it does make us feel good. But in reality, it's all about paying bills. It's all about having enough assets to really get everything taken care of financially. And if we can just get our hands on how much cash is really available, then we'll be much better off. I mean, that's really the kind of the iron in the fire here, is that if you know, hey, I've got all this money in the bank, in my checking, and in my savings, and then all of a sudden you start realizing how much more access to cash you really probably do have in your life, then you start realizing, you know what? Maybe I don't need all this cash. And then some people become, and I don't mean this in an unhealthy way, but people become hoarders of cash. They're like, oh, I really like seeing that number in the bank grow. And if you feel that way, you should probably have a litmus test with somebody like us to sit down and say, do I really have enough cash? And the thing is you got to really appreciate and trust that opinion, I think, where, it's hard to know the balance. Because when you're speaking with a financial advisor, like, they want to invest your money. That's how we get paid, right? So does it make sense for us to say, oh, yeah, you definitely have more cash than you need? But to have somebody who really can just look at it from an honest opinion and say, no, this is really what you need. And you know what? If these things happen, that your fears, like we talked about that last week, right? What is the fear that the cash is driving you to feel like you have to have? So if you can play out that fear through your cash scenario, you'll know what the excess looks like.
Yeah, I think it's important when you're kind of going through this conversation in your mind to really just understand, the purpose of liquid cash, right? So there's a certain amount that everybody needs to have in reserve at easy, instantaneous access, right? Anything beyond that, though, that you're leaving in these kind of low interest-bearing accounts or zero interest-bearing accounts, there's an opportunity cost that you got to factor in there, right? That money could be elsewhere and could be earning for you, but instead it's in a kind of an opportunity zone where you're not going to generate much of a return off of it. And is the reason it's there because you think you need access to it immediately, or because you think you might need access to it at some point where we could potentially show you different ways to create that same feeling of safety with an asset that isn't going to cost you anything, that isn't going to be working against you, and it would free up that cash to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there.
And there are ways that, that you can create cash that do cost you. I mean, there are. But there are things that, might be an opportunity cost versus a potential cost, because it's really not about having the cash. right? I mean, at the end of the day, most people are afraid, well, if I lose my job, what's going to happen? Well, if you're a cybersecurity computer engineer, you probably have a job for the next 50 years of your choosing.
Yeah, if you show up.
Yeah, you probably have one of the greatest job security positions in the world. Now, that being said, right, you probably don't need that much real true cash. You might have a break or a hiatus between different employers if you're choosing to move. But most of the time, that's in that world, right? You're choosing your job. So in reality, it's just about having the ability to have short-term access to cash. And so even evaluating your role and what that might look like might be relevant.
Yeah, some of the people that I'm thinking about right off the top of my head, if there's a question of kind of the opportunity or the opportunity cost, right? Having access to that cash to be able to move into another opportunity, and that being kind of the strategy that they're layering in here as they're accumulating, completely understand that. And that's one of the things that we would probably say, yes, you should start to build in somehow being prepared for what you don't know is next. But it's all about that preparation to be there. And so as we start building together, one of the things that we're going to be talking about is how to build into your plan some of these kind of like portals into that liquidity so that you can capitalize and pull some things together if an opportunity comes up without having to take a step back from really what are these other places like the market or some of these other investment vehicles can offer you in terms of their growth.
Yeah, I like the word portals. That's a really good word. I like the word levers. Or windows of accessibility. Like I like all of those kind of like tagline kind of phrases that we hear in our industry. And I think if any of those resonate with our listeners, that's important. I would tell you that the first one that I'm going to jump on here today is going to be your 401k. For a lot of our listeners, we have 401ks, and we fail to realize that is potentially a very, very large tax-free accessibility window, lever, portal. There you can grab $50,000 from your 401k if you have the money in there. Now we're assuming you're putting money in retirement, but the thing is that a lot of people don't put money into their 401k because they're trying to build up their 6-month savings. I've heard so many people tell me that. Mm-hmm. And they're missing out on matches from their employer. Mm. They're not getting
free
the match.
Money.
Yeah, free money. They're not getting the match. They're not saving. They're not investing in retirement. And in reality, they can have access to cash right there. $50,000, and they can pay it back over 5 years, right? I mean, those are really big opportunities for an emergency cash vehicle.
One of the best elements of that is when you are paying it back, it's coming out of your payroll and you're paying yourself the interest too.
Yeah.
So it's really for for the need to access an amount up to that amount of $50,000, it is really a really strong place to consider.
I like it. It's definitely one. It's one we talk to people about. I've had people who were, 50,000 is kind of low today, but that conversation has existed in the past where someone was looking to make a transition to a home.
Yeah.
And we talked about accessing that 50,000 as part of their down payment while they were thinking about getting their house ready to list and sell and so forth.
Yeah, one of the cautions with that is I think we have all of these places where we're like, hey, this thing over here, but right, it's a conversation that needs to happen in the context of you and your plan. So many people have come to me and said, well, I really want to pay off some debt over here. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know that going into that 401k plan to tap into that to kind of get rid of some, short-term
credit
card debt, right? Yeah. Or buy the vehicle or, the thing, right? The stuff. And that's not what we're talking about here, first of all, folks. But there's a couple of other things there too that you want to consider. It's like, what kind of job security do you really have? If you feel very strongly that this is something that you're going to be there for a while, that's an important piece of this as well, because you do need to be employed while working through paying that off.
Right. Like if for some people, it's like, hey, listen, I might be losing my job. You might want to say I need money sooner than later.
Right.
But eventually that's going to be, if you don't pay that loan back, and I don't remember what the time period is, but that becomes a taxable distribution at some point. So you got to be careful on that.
Yeah.
So this is, again, in the conversation we're having, or the context of the conversation is really like, hey, I've got an emergency and I need cash. And that's why you would have it in the bank, right? You're saying, I'm going to forego making a return somewhere because I may have this unforeseen event.
Yeah, I mean, these things that we're talking about, these hidden treasures, they're certainly not checking account alternatives, right? So this isn't like free money just to go spend it on whatever need may arise. This is intended to be serious consideration, emergency access, like real life decisions, not
And it's
kind of frivolous spending, discretionary
I'm starting
stuff.
to get a little concerned about the phone calls that are going to come in. Not for the free mug now, but
Yeah.
the coffee table conversation of they said we should do this today.
No, well, I think the thing is what you're really going to be. You should walk away from the show feeling empowered that, hey, I'm saving all this cash in the bank,
Yeah.
and I could be making it work for me in retirement.
Amen.
I can get this out of my hands. I can get it to the advisor, right? That's what we want. We want people to invest, right? That's all part of the story. Let's not kid ourselves. But what we really know is that if we can empower people to really take care of themselves, and they know that those financial fears can be, pushed off or, constrained through other mechanisms and other means, then you can take real assets and put them to work and get yourself moving forward.
Take me to church, Ben Brayshaw.
Well, we'll have to get you to a Baptist church, Seth.
Hand raising going on over here. So what else can you do in this qualified space? By the way, that's what we call this. If you're unfamiliar with some of the terminology today, we're going to be talking about qualified, non-qualified. We're in qualified right now, 401k, IRA. Hey, did I just say IRA?
You did.
Thank you very much. I did. And so what can you do with that IRA? Well, there is a little thing in there, it's provision of your IRA that says that you can go ahead and take money out of your IRA, and as long as you get it back within 60 days, right? It's the 60-day rule. It's going to work, right? You're not going to have to pay. You're not going to have to pay the taxes on that distribution, or the penalties. But just beware that it's pretty hefty, that 10% right off the top. And you are responsible for that. So there's a little bit more in there that you need to know. But there is access. There's a window.
I would say that's this is probably the most dangerous thing. We talk about
heart
this.
attack right
I
now.
know,
I can't even believe we're saying it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like there's so many different. 60 days is so super quick.
Yeah.
If you need the money, it's like I need it literally for 2 minutes and then I'm sending it back. But there's some major holes here. You can only do it once in a year. That's it. You can only do an indirect. They call it an indirect rollover because it's coming to you and going, to the financial institution again. So if you did an indirect rollover, maybe of an old retirement plan, which went to you and then to an investment plan, so it didn't go directly from investment company to investment company, and then you did this, you could find yourself in jeopardy.
Right.
So you got to really be very super careful. This is not something like if you're going to do this, you better be literally in the hands of a financial professional doing this because it is super, super slippery.
60 days is 60 days.
Oh, it is like to the penny. Like you don't want to get it in on the 60th day. It's like maybe 58. So, but it's definitely an accessibility item. It's definitely an area where, you know what, if you knew you're going to be out of a job for a month, you could potentially see this as a tax-free opportunity. Now, one of the big problems, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that when you take the money out, there's usually the automatic tax withholding. And you will have to come up with not only the money that you pulled out, but you'll have to pay that back plus the money that they withheld for taxes. Now, you'll get your tax withholding back when you file your taxes again, but you have to replenish 100% of the money to avoid any of the tax penalties or distribution equivalents.
Yeah, anything less than what came out goes back in. It's immediately going to your income tax, and you're looking at 10% distribution penalties, and so it gets expensive fast.
So basically, if you took $100,000 out of your IRA and they eventually gave you 80 because they withheld 20% for taxes, you still have to write a check for $100,000 back in 60 days.
Right.
And so if you need the 80 grand, it's hard pressed to say that you're going to have the 100,000 in 60 days. So again, it's an option. It's a hidden lever, one a lot of people don't use or know about, but it's definitely something that you should be aware of.
Yeah. You know what? And one of the things there for first-time home buyers, that IRA is a place that you can go for $10,000 as long as you qualify for a first-time home buyer, which means you haven't bought a home in 5 years, even if you have a primary residence. So
yeah, that's
another access point that comes up every once in a while.
No, that's good. That's good. Number three. I am going to talk about lines of credit.
But I wanted to talk about lines of credit.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No.
Lines of credit. A lot of people now. This is kind of a 3 and 4. So as we kind of break through these, we have lines of credit, which are personal lines of credit. You can go to the bank. You say, I have this much of assets. I just want to have the ability to pull out money when I need it. You always do this before you ever need money.
Right.
No one ever thinks about that. So if you're a listener,
while you have a job,
while you have a job and everything else, you just want to have a nice line of credit. Now, some people can get personal lines of credit because they have different assets and so forth. But number 4, is the home equity line of credit, which is the most common. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 different lines of credit. The personal line of credit is usually going to have a little bit higher interest rate. The home equity line usually has a little bit lower, but some people, you might find yourself in a position where you have equity in your house right now because real estate has risen so aggressively that inflation does have some positive outcomes. So if you last appraised your home, I'm sure it's going to appraise for a little bit more, and banks love to have a line of credit.
So one of the things that's like a mindset around this that is kind of that first hurdle for most people is the concept of the line of credit here. So one of the first goals that most people have is to pay off their house, right? I don't want to have a mortgage on this house, and we're going to pay it off. That's great. All for that. Now, with this line of credit, once you've kind of got some wiggle room and that equity in the house, it's almost a no-brainer to say, hey, put this in place, right? Because it seems the gut response is, oh, no, I'm putting a mortgage on my house. It's a second mortgage. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to put it in place and use it all up to go to, Disneyland or whatever you got going on in the background there. This is actually a safety net, a more secure way for you to have access should you need it. And it's not the first place you're going to go when you want or need or whatever that access to capital is. But when it's in place, like Ben said, do it before the event happens, because if the job goes away, guess what? So does that line of credit. Can't go put it in place then.
That's a really good point. And I also think that if you're going to do it, now's a great time to do it because of that inflated real estate marketplace, right? Mm-hmm. The last thing we want to do is see a crashing real estate market. Then all of a sudden there's economic hardship, and then you need the line of credit.
And rising interest rates.
Yeah. This is
it's kind of the opportune time, right?
Yeah.
Real estate's at an all-time high. Interest rates are coming off of all-time lows.
Yeah.
Really is a sweet spot to get that established.
So if you're listening today, this is something that I would highly encourage you to take advantage of. And usually what you have to do is you have to borrow a little bit of money out, initially, and you can pay it back in 30 days, and it sits there alive for a period of time depending on the bank, right?
Yeah.
It's like a year or whatever, and then you pull a little more money out and you put it back. It's just a revolving line. Yeah. It's really what it is.
They're so uninvasive as far as the process goes, typically, to get them put into place. Sometimes it's just drive-by appraisals, and it's relatively simple and should be inexpensive. Hey, we are going to take a break here at Money on Tap. We are talking about hidden cash, hidden levers. Where do you go for all of that money? You didn't even realize it was there. But guess what? On top of that, show 200 of Money on Tap, and because you're listening today, and you're going to give us a call at 855-226-8551 or reach out at info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're going to send you a Money on Tap mug, and it's only for the first 200, folks. So make it snappy. We'll be right back.
If you're listening today and, your questions are outside the box of estate planning or financial planning or any number of the pieces that we kind of traditionally talk about, don't forget that Brayshaw Financial offers auto, home, and business insurance. and we have an entire department that handles all of that for you. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 and be happy to take care of those needs for you. Or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. And guess what, folks? Show 200 when you call us and you're the first 200 to call or email us. We're going to give you a Money on Tap mug. And it's just our way of saying thank you. 200 shows, and we're pretty excited to be able to do that with you today. We're talking about hidden cash, hidden levers, and all the places that you've been stacking up these cash reserves and you didn't even realize it. You know, cash we've talked about last show was king, and this time we're going to talk about accessing in that capital, accessing that cash in all sorts of ways that you didn't even realize you had access to. So with that, we're into loans. Right? We're talking about loans. Loans on what?
Well, yeah. Well, we talked about loans or lines of credit on houses and personal lines of credit. Those are, they're different, but they're similar in concept, different rates, and so forth. I think the thing is that I want to reiterate that this is all about mitigating the fear of not having enough cash on hand at home. Like, hey, I need to have 6 months of cash if I lose my job. I need to have this. I need to have that. And people are foregoing the opportunity to invest, to make that money work for them, to keep up with inflation. Every time you have $1 in the bank, it went down 6% this last year in value. That's what inflation means, right? It is a horrible thing to say that you no longer have $1 in the bank, you have 94 cents, right? And next year, that 94 cents will probably be worth 90 cents or 85 cents. And it continues to lose its value each and every day. And so getting this money working for you to at least try to combat inflation, address inflation, reduce the impact of inflation, those are all really relevant things. So getting as much money and much things working for you in that capacity as possible makes this show relevant of how you can access cash in case of a job loss, a health crisis, that are all these fears that people live in. Now, some of those fears, and to be really clear, are completely unfounded, right? Like we talked about the cybersecurity tech, programmer. Like you could be probably the worst in the business. Someone's going to find a job for you, and some of the health, crises that, I've got to be dozens of people that over the years have come in and said, I got this money just in case like some sort of health event happens. I'm like, okay, so do you have health insurance? Yeah, I have health insurance. Okay. Or you're over 65. You have Medicare, right? Yeah. I'm like, well, they're going to cover the first up to 100 days, right? Yeah. Or I have long-term care insurance. Oh, wow. So you really don't need this much cash. It's not that cash isn't relevant. It's just really trying to find well-founded and the unfounded concerns and separating those and coming up with the right number. And that's what this story is about today, is doing that. And Seth, you're talking about loans. The next loan scenario, people are like, I hate loans.
Right.
How many people hate loans?
It's a negative connotation here, right?
It's horrible.
Yeah, but it's leverage. Let's call it leverage because that's really what it is. It's the way it's a way that you really, really invest well in real estate, particularly, is through leverage.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, so what you can do or what you can leverage in our world that a lot of people don't talk about are the stocks and bonds that you own in your portfolio today. That is a huge thing that people don't talk about. I don't know why it's not talked about. I don't know. We haven't ever talked about it on 200 shows, so maybe we're at fault too. But but it is something that is significant. We use it all the time.
Yeah, but we got to kind of keep something over here, like all of our magic that we've got in our bag can't get poured out on air.
I'm gonna build more magic here. But the thing, it's like we have the ability to take your stocks, get them appraised. That sounds really weird, right? Yeah. We send them out, we figure out what value they are, and they'll lend based on your equities. And they just figure out we're only going to lend on 30% of the value of that equity, or 60 or 70% of the value of that equity. And then they come up with a number, and have a $1 million account, they might lend you $500,000.
Yeah, there's some high graded bonds they'll loan up to 90% against.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to, if you either own those bonds already, or if you're willing to use those as leverage to essentially double your cash for another investment opportunity, that opportunity exists. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I have people who are in real estate say, well, I don't want to invest all my cash because then I can't buy a piece of real estate, and be like, oh, no, yes, you can. Yeah. Oh, yes, you can. It is the biggest fallacy. It's probably one of the best ways to diversify your assets without feeling too overwhelmed on not having enough diversity. Like if you're really into real estate pretty heavily, like this should probably be something you go to immediately, because this is a great way to mitigate real estate decline, stock market incline, right? I mean, because you have something offsetting that.
Important to note, too, rather than as an alternative to liquidating a portfolio to cover something like that, this is tax-free.
Yeah.
You don't pay taxes on the loan you took.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point.
I think we did. Now that I'm thinking back, I'm pretty sure we did cover this a while ago when we were talking about how the wealthy, create income and don't pay taxes. And this is just one of those levers.
Well, we know Elon Musk has been doing it for a long time, along with every other wealthy billionaire.
Right.
So it's one of those things, though, that, the average Joe who has a decent sized stock portfolio is not considering is a cash asset without feeling the obligation or the fear of like, I have to liquidate. And Dan, for a great point, I'm going to be taxed. Right? I mean, that's really what people are like, oh, I don't know what the tax ramifications are and everything else. Is like, borrow against it.
Yeah. And for the other end of the coin here, like Seth mentioned before, there's upside, there's downside. I mean, the important thing to keep in mind with this is simply really that, if the value of your portfolio does decline, that relationship, that percentage that we talked about, that you'd be willing to acquire a loan for against the total value of the portfolio, if you dip below that percentage, you could be called to come in with some cash.
Yeah, you could. And I always usually tell people to borrow less than the percentage for that exact reason.
That's good advice.
Yeah. I always
don't max it out.
Don't max it out. Give yourself some space.
Yeah.
And there's an interest rate. It's a floating rate. I mean, I think right now it's like 3 3/4%, or whatever it is. It's
plus or minus.
I mean, that's a competitive house rate. It's not really that expensive. So you start thinking about it. Now, it varies on how much money you're borrowing. There's lots of factors here.
Very.
And we're not really trying to engage in the idea that, hey, listen, call us, move your stocks here so you can take a loan, because, you can't take this money out to go buy more stocks. Like that's not how this works, right? It's not like, hey, I can borrow against my stocks like it's margin. You are taking a margin or a loan on your equities, but it's not for the ability to margin back again, which is really a very dangerous thing. Which if you do, it's really very dangerous. Like that's just borderline stupid, because you're just killing yourself if the stock market crashes. And with what's been happening recently, I don't think I want to live through that volatility. That's horrible.
On the bright side, you are listening to Money on Tap. And you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're talking about hidden cash and hidden levers. And if you give us a call or email, you guess what? If you're one of the first 200, because we've just reached the 200 show mark, we are commemorating that with a special mug that we would love to send you. Give us a call. Get a hold of us via email. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
On this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, Seth Cressman shares just one excellent example of how the Brayshaw Financial Group has helped so many with their financial dilemmas.
One of the classic scenarios that I think of more clients coming to the table with, and their planning that they've already been trying to do, is we're going to pay off the house. Everything that we have in our retirement accounts is going to pay off the house or something like this, and we're going to live on Social Security the rest of our lives. It's so sad. That's what their plan is. And then to be able to turn around and come up with several different options that they're able to put into place today to really substantially change that story for them. It's one of the gifts of doing what we do.
Thanks for joining us for this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, with great tips from the pros in three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. Now here's more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. And if you are one of the first 200 to reach out to us, we're going to send you a Money on Tap Brayshaw Financial Group mug, just as a thank you for being a listener with us for the last 200 shows of Money on Tap. And that was a pretty cool mark that we just reached. And yeah, we'd love to celebrate that with us. Give us a call, reach out via email. We're talking about hidden cash, hidden levers today. All those places you just didn't even realize that you had access to capital. Ben, such a great show that we've had an opportunity to put together. And Dan, I am excited that you get to talk about this next piece about annuities and how to put those pieces together and into play.
Yeah, annuities are kind of an interesting thing this way in that they're fully insured. They have value that is, if we're talking about a fixed annuity, not able to go down based upon market conditions. And a lot of them, if it's a fixed rate annuity like we discussed in the previous show, they've got a guaranteed earning rate on them, right? So they're very stable, very safe in that regard. And they may be something that you can access for cash really by doing it a couple different ways. Some annuity companies will offer you a loan kind of internally against the value of the annuity, or you can use it as collateral to get a line of credit or kind of more traditional loan, because a bank would view that, or any creditor would view that as essentially guaranteed money. The principal is protected. It's backed up by a A-rated insurer of X billions of dollars of value, and we know that it's guaranteed to grow at a certain rate, whatever that may be. It's backed up by contract. So that's a very stable piece to potentially use as collateral to go ahead and secure a loan. And if you're lucky enough that the interest rate that you're assessed through whatever the source of the loan is less than what the annuity is earning, you're essentially creating that arbitrage there where you're paying less than the asset's earning to access it, and there may be some opportunity with that loan to additionally gather more returns. So it's a good possible place to take a look at if you happen to own it that you may not have thought of as a source of cash. As we kind of discussed in the last episode, annuities can be illiquid. This is just a different way to raise cash out of that investment piece you might own.
So really, it's all about collateral, right? What assets have you gathered that you can start to take a look at and will be considered collateral? And some of the access that you have can be more seamless, like, for instance, the securities that Ben was just talking about, or the bonds that you were mentioning before. Like, there's a different kind of a level of collateral with each one of these pieces. In terms of the annuity piece, do you find there's kind of a general rule of thumb that people want to see, or is that the lenders want to see from the kind of companies that they're lending against or that they're collateralizing there?
I don't know if I'd go by rule of thumb. I think the conditions change with kind of the interest rate world and different carriers' appetites to do that directly. Some of them do that, some of them don't. So I think it varies a little bit by what's going on with some of the outside conditions. But in terms of just as a piece of collateral, where does it rank in the scale of collaterable assets? And annuity is going to be right up there at the top because of the fact that it is insured by, presuming it's an A-rated insurance carrier. Let's start there.
And it's a guaranteed annuity. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, what makes an annuity really very interesting in this world is that you can walk into a bank, right? And you can say, hey, this is what I've got. And this is what's guaranteed. Like, for the same reason, CDs, cash in the bank, these are even your house doesn't have the 100% coverage. Like if you have equity in your house, they're going to take some percentage of that equity. They take 100% of the annuity, 100% of your savings, 100%. I mean, those are really, really important features to know about collateral, because I think, it's funny. I'm glad you said it that way, Seth, because I didn't, but that's exactly what it is. These are all collateral items that we're kind of dealing with. And, transition to our seventh item here as we're kind of wrapping up the show, is insurance collateral item number 2, which is life insurance. Now, what I think people don't really understand, and I'm not talking about term insurance. Like, we're not going through like, hey, listen, everyone, you have your term insurance to cover your family and your kids, but the we're talking about like the permanent kind of insurance, whether it's whole life or universal life or anything where you're maybe overpaying to build up cash and an asset in that capacity. There's a lot of people that have that. I mean, I have one. I think you guys both have one. I mean, there's a use for it. There's even companies who we've talked about in the past and done shows on it that do income riders, and you can build lifetime income from life insurance. And if you haven't heard that show, we're going to be touching on that again here coming up. And but it's amazing because you can just go borrow cash from your life insurance policy tax-free, and you can go do what you need to do with it. And what's really cool is most of the time, the money, like if you're invested in something, it's still giving you a return on that. So you're paying yourself back the interest.
Yeah, and what's extra unique about this one, this is probably the one out of the 7 opportunities, and I haven't really looked at it closely to study that, but in the right instance, there's no reason to pay it back. Right?
That's true.
That's
it is true, unfortunately.
Wandering into some of the kind of riskier territory. But, if you can keep the policy in force, if there's enough cash or if you're willing to pay premiums long enough that the policy itself does not collapse, and that's a very important thing that requires some monitoring. But if you can keep the insurance in force to the point in which you pass away, all the insurance company do is going to, reduce the death benefit by the loan outstanding and the interest you owe and just pay out less on your demise.
Yeah. It's funny because even today I was working on a client who's borrowed a significant amount of money from their insurance policy to help build a house. They're like building a house out of this insurance policy. It's pretty phenomenal what they've done. Now they've had to push the limits. We're doing illustrations to make sure it's going to maintain just for what you're talking about there, Dan. That this thing's not going to collapse on them because that's a full taxable event. So there's this whole mitigation issue of trying to keep the policy in force and make sure you don't borrow too much. But looking at the returns of that type of program, they have between the loan has been so low because rates are low, right? But they're actually making money on this arbitrage while taking the money out. So it's actually hysterical. And we're like, you can't count on this moving forward. Let's do something more reasonable or as reasonable as we can project on that. So cash and insurance is a huge opportunity because I think, and annuities too, I mean, they do have different plays, but the most immediate liquid cash that I see without kind of a lot of like strings, like I think about the 401k we talked about, right? You have to string, you have to make sure you're still at your job, right? The IRA, you got that string where it's like 60 days. The line of credit, you got to open it, right? You got to go through that, but you got to keep it moving. Like you got to borrow a little bit out each once in a while to keep it alive so they don't, close it down because it's not being used. The loan on the securities, like that's an application process. It's a great program. We pretty much encourage everyone to at least go through the program in case something does happen. And so that's really great that way too. The annuity's good. But, it's a collateralization. It's a little more complicated. You got to bring it to the bank, but you do have the 10% free withdrawal, and post, 59.5 without any penalties. But the life insurance, if you have $100,000 in cash and you're like, here, send me a check, you'll have it in probably a week, 2 weeks, a month at the most. No questions asked, no taxes, no time periods to pay it back.
That's a pretty nice piggy bank.
It's an incredible feature, and it's one that's underutilized and understood. The only string on it is, the maintenance of the policy, right? But as long as you can figure out a way to keep the policy in force, that cash is right there for you.
Yeah, and if you're paying it properly and it's moving forward correctly, you should be okay. But that's where you need somebody that can really understand your policy specifically, run illustrations, and do projections for you to know that whatever you're paying or doing is still going to make it work.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to withdraw it to that limit. You want to leave yourself a fair amount of wiggle room there in case conditions do turn. But, it's staring right there at you on the statement. And it can be, in some instances, like the situation you have, really considerable sums of money.
Yeah.
Folks, this is the 200th show of Money on Tap. It has been a lot of fun to have you aboard with us for these shows. And I just want to thank you, Ben. I want to thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Seth.
You're welcome. And gosh, it's a lot of fun. I can't wait for the next 200. and see what we're going to do. But if this is you listening to Money on Tap today, and if you haven't heard already, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com to receive your free commemorative 200th episode mug of Money on Tap. Make it a great week, folks.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.